in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Monday, July 25th, 2022. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards, from across the country. And yes, we thought that they were going to get a little rain today, but no. Let it burn, let it burn, let it burn. Well, you can join us at the end of the week, too, for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. Amy Connect will be joining me once again as my awesome co-host this Friday. You can also check out our once or twice monthly The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril, of course, is the editor-in-chief at the Bucks County Beacon. He joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. And you can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can help support this show becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also support the show right now by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash the subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. You can join our Discord server. Information on that is in tonight's show notes. And for more PA Progressive Talk, tune in to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your streams, he's there. Head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out, if you haven't already, the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And you know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. For all you gamers out there, yep, the Game Inn, that's with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops they do. And look, when the school's in session, kids get discounts when they get A's in the report card. Can't beat that. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn with two N's. That's The Game Inn on Twitter. If you've got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. That's at SongADayMan on Twitter. And look, don't let Paul Martino and his billionaire friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Now, Raging Chicken has teamed up with levelfield.net to launch a truly community-rooted pack to invest in organizing, support local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmask the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small-dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. That's ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Quick show notes. Next week, we're going to be off again. I'm going up to see my folks up in New York. Very, very excited about that. One last hurrah to keep the summer going. But we'll be back the following week. A reminder that we will be here on Wednesday. Cyril and I will be back probably around 11 o'clock. Cyril and I are, we're getting together this week, right? We finally got our schedules working. And Amy Connect will be back once again on Friday. Some quick Twitter shout-outs, if I can find my paper, for all the folks there retweeting and kind of letting everybody know about tonight's show. Melza B, Jenny Stevens, Kirsten Zolfo, Starry-Eyed, Kathleen Sage, Venting, Pink Lady A, Give Her the Gavel, Dr. Jess, New York City, NYC, Outlaw Josie Wells, Cyril Michaleko, Debbie Feeney, When There Are 15, Susan Morrow, and Beth Sini. Thank you for getting the word out and for all the retweets, so all our Twitter warriors that are out there. So on tonight's show, Let's get to it. I welcome Alyssa Bowen back to the program. Alyssa is a senior researcher and managing editor at the progressive watchdog organization True North Research. Tonight, our focus turns to right-wing dark money that is funding the anti-abortion movement's push to take over state legislatures, and deepen the devastation wrought by the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Alyssa received her PhD in history from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in 2021 with an interest in fascism and anti-fascism, solidarity and social movements, immigration, exile, and transnational history. She has bylines in The Nation and in TruthOut, where she's a regular contributor. More of her public writing can be found on TNR's website and her Substack. And tonight, we're going to be really digging in, specifically focus on a couple of pieces that Alyssa has recently co-authored for TruthOut. One, dark money fuels the anti-abortion movement's push to control state legislatures. And right-wing dark money is coming for reproductive rights in your state. Links to both articles are in today's show notes, as is links to True North Research. That's truenorthresearch.org. Welcome to the show, Alyssa.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be back.
It's great to have you back. And I got to say, I'm hoping that there's going to be a day when I'm going to have you on the show when we don't have devastating research and devastating politics that are happening all over the country. So I appreciate being here. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Well, okay. So one, shout outs to Emily, Amy, and Anna. Welcome to the show. Great having you here. So Alyssa, one, obviously, what we're seeing in our politics, our political cultures in our country today, right, is what I would say is almost like a full-throttled, kind of full steam ahead kind of assault by the extreme right wing, where it seems like the Roe v. Wade decision was just a kind of like, okay, all gloves are off moment. Is that kind of where you'd see things are right now, or how would you characterize where we're at?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think, we've talked about this, but I think this has been in the making for decades and, ramped up with Citizens United, given the lack of public disclosure laws. But I do think right now at this moment, they've worked for decades to get Roe v. Wade overturned, and now they've already set their sights on loftier goals, like banning contraception and looking, if you look at Justice Thomas's concurring opinion in the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe, he's saying that the right to privacy that undergirded Dobbs should also be challenged in cases that protect gay marriage, gay relationships, contraception, and even he didn't mention this one, but the right to privacy also protects interracial marriage. So this is sort of just the beginning, unfortunately.
Yeah, and what we saw, this just came out yesterday. This was from Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? I don't know if you saw this, but she made the statement that the Republican Party's primary focus this year should be on making the political party one of Christian nationalism. Said Greene, quote, we need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian, and I say it proudly, we should be Christian nationalists. So this is like, for me, one of these all, gloves off moment. They're not worried about, do they need to hide behind everything? They've got what they want. They think they've got what there's in place. And here we go. So. Yeah,
it's pretty terrifying. I did see that. I don't think, already Christian nationalists have a lot of power and are seeking increasingly more power. And they say they use the guise of, we talked about this last time, of originalism in their, right, this fake theory, right-wing theory, to pretend like their justices have the moral high ground, when in actuality, if they're supposed to be caring about what the founding fathers wanted, but that, in reality, the founding fathers believed in freedom of religion and didn't, want a society, we don't need to base our society based on what these men want, but even if we are going by their metrics, it's absurd and so contradictory.
Right, and it would seem that, if we're looking at like who does Samuel Alito consider as the founding fathers, and apparently it's the people who burned witches, right? So that's
Yeah, right?
so
That's exciting in his opinion.
that's his family tree. So so now before this, anybody should worry that this is going to be necessarily all kind of doom and gloom. Although obviously we're all living a lot of doom and gloom. One thing that struck me at one of the things that you all say, and this is kind of was written with your co-authors Evan Vorpal and Julia Peck. At the end of the one piece, right-wing dark money is coming for your reproductive rights of your state, which that one was kind of came out at the beginning of June before the decision had come down. One of the things that you conclude with in that piece is the silver lining is that the expected fall of Roe has pulled back the veil on the anti-democratic forces trying to reshape the judiciary and has illustrated the power of often overlooked state offices. Alito's gambit to let the states decide may prove to be the spark for a stronger movement against the corruption of dark money and for more democratic political system that will protect against assaults on reproductive justice and fundamental freedoms in all 50 states. And I thought that was a really, and it wasn't just that. What I liked about that conclusion of that piece is it wasn't simply just like, hey, hopefully something good will happen. But it does seem to be the fact that organizing is actually happening at the state level. And before we dive into some of the specifics of these articles, is it your sense that right now, going forward for the next several years, that really the states are where the battles are going to be? Like everything from, what we're talking here about reproductive rights, obviously, right? But also when it comes to, say, gay rights, democratic rights for that matter, that we're going to be really kind of a state-by-state battles here. Is that kind of your assessment of things?
Yeah, I mean, there's for sure still room for obviously fighting back at the federal level. I mean, Senator Whitehouse introduced the Disclose Act last week, which will help, if passed, would help protect and broaden financial disclosure. And that would be a good step forward. But as we've seen, the Supreme Court is sadly captured by this far right kind of contingent on the Supreme Court, and we already see some of the inklings of what's going to come out. If you thought this year was bad, like wait till next year kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Wait for Act 2.
Yeah, exactly. We already know that they're going to maybe hurt state-based elections by kind of like revisiting the ability of the courts to fix any kind of extreme gerrymandering situation in the states. So and we saw, there were so many issues they took up and chose to take up this term that were devastating, on abortion, on ability to regulate the climate, all these kinds of things. And they're saying, this is what we are, one of the things we're arguing against in our pieces is that there's this right-wing narrative that the state, it's more democratic to go to the states. Like, don't worry, Roe might have gotten overturned, but in the states, it'll be even more democratic. You could have a local discussion and debate, and it'll all come out in the wash. Well, to answer your question, yes. Like the battles, I think, will be a lot in the states because they haven't yet captured most state officials and courts. So, and they've made major movements to do that sort of before Roe was overturned, and they've created this infrastructure that we can talk about. But there is room for fighting back. And this, for example, the state Supreme Courts are actually kind of a bastion of democracy, and they really have, even in far right state, or in solidly red states, they've been fighting, or they've been kind of like a bastion of democracy, protecting many people's rights and freedoms.
Well, excellent. And this is, one of the main reasons I really wanted to have you on, especially reading these pieces, is because I think I said a version of this on the show when we were on last time, is that this kind of knowledge and kind of being able to track in these organizations and kind of understanding that infrastructure are really tools for struggle. I mean, they're ways of kind of understanding what the terrain is to better prepare us, to think about how we fight back and actually, to inoculate us against some of these arguments about, well, don't you want your local representative to have more say and to have more direct democracy, and to understand that those things are it's just flack being thrown out there so that we're distracted from what the agenda is. So one of the things that struck me is that you lead this piece, "Dark Money Fuels the Anti-Abortion Movement's Push to Control State Legislatures." You lead this piece off with a discussion of Students for Life as an organization, and I thought that might be a good place to really start to dig in to see what this infrastructure looks like on the right, and who these folks are. So can you kind of give us that little introduction of who Students for Life are, and then we can start to broaden that out to see where their funding comes from and what their impact looks like?
Sure, yeah. So Students for Life started out originally as mostly like supposed to be sort of they call it AstroTurf organization, organization pretending to be grassroots, but funded by a few ultra wealthy individuals or corporations. And so they've been around for a while, but they were, at least until very recently, looking at least college campuses, doing advocacy around college campuses, recruiting, that kind of thing. Recently, they've become much broader. They've become much larger. They've created a 501c4 arm, which is an advocacy arm that allows them to do way more lobbying and like direct political activity. They have been a leading voice and have perhaps become the leading anti-abortion sort of think tank, if you want to call it that, and sort of organization dedicated to promoting these really harmful lies, really, about abortion.
So, and you mentioned one of the examples of that is they have some polling research that they kind of came up with, and they said, hey, look, most Americans basically kind of agree with us, right? Most Americans want to get rid of abortion, which was, I mean, completely, from my read at least, right, completely if not disinformation, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and this has now been covered in the news, but they put out this poll. They paid for the result poll probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to have it done, and then it comes out and they publicly sort of misrepresent, or at least like cherry pick, the data. And this is something I think we talked about a bit on the last time I was on, but these groups often do this, unlike political scientists or academics who really are genuinely dedicated to looking at the evidence, balancing it with like existing literature or whatever, existing knowledge. These groups just want to promote their one agenda item, and this group's agenda item is banning abortion at every level, essentially, except they've said they would give exception for if a person's life is in danger who's carrying the pregnancy, but not for like rape or incest victims. And they misrepresent this data just to like further this goal. And it's something that a lot of these dark money groups do, is that they find one way, like, for example, I can't think of the exact like data point, but the Independent Women's Forum, another dark money group funded by Leonard Leo, has or a Leonard Leo group, excuse me, has in talking about student debt, for example, said that something distorted, like the top 2/5 of debt holders are in the top 80%. So they just like pick a specific group to distort the actual narrative and suggest that something is like popular or beneficial when it's actually detrimental and completely unpopular.
Gotta love that. So you said, well, here we go with, you just said like a poll like this, that in order to run that poll was about 100, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to kind of get this thing done. So it's not like these are just what people might think, just some students who kind of are getting together to kind of like express their opinions, but rather they've got some deep pockets. You've already mentioned Leonard Leo here and this kind of system of networks, right? Of that is kind of has been part of funding, not just kind of organizations just like Students for Life, but across the board. So if we were to pull the veil back a little bit on the public facing PR wings of these things, what do we start to see in terms of where this money is coming from and what their agendas seem to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So your listeners might have heard of Leonard Leo. He's been in the news more recently. Prior to, say, 2018, he was very much in the shadows. But Leonard Leo sits on the board, or at least until very recently, has sat on the board of Students for Life. And he is this far-right lawyer, Federalist Society fundraiser, has been called Trump's judge whisperer because he sort of temporarily stepped down to be an unpaid advisor to Trump. And that way he didn't have to like disclose any of his financials because he wasn't like he wasn't an official counsel. But Leo hand selected the list of potential SCOTUS nominees from which Trump chose 3, because Trump, was able to get Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch in those seats. And Leonard Leo manages a massive network that, by True North Research tally, has raised almost $600 million since 2014.
Since 2014.
Since 2014. Yep. So it's massive, and the groups include a lot of groups that we're going to talk about, I think, but Republican State Leadership Committee, RSLC, which has gotten more than $6 million from this network between 2012 and 2020, and they are kind of the main organization funneling money into states, into the state policy, into state level politics. And then RAGA it's Republican Attorney General Association is used to be part of RSLC but became separate, and is also its largest contributor is the Concord Fund / Judicial Crisis Network, which is Leonard's perhaps like biggest organization within his network. And so these groups have been like so important in dominating and getting right-wing control over state politics.
So you have, just so we're painting the picture for everybody, you got Leonard Leo sitting at the top, right? Yeah. And he's been affiliated with the Federal Society for quite some time, right? And the Federal Society, of course, is, it's your punch card, right? It's your dance card, basically, to get the potential nod to become a Supreme Court justice, right? They have an entire network of basically recruiting, one could say grooming their own kind of conservative candidates. I'm sorry I had to go there. But, to bring them along as they start law school through this conservative network, and it's a networking and well-funded organization with an agenda, right, is to turn the courts more to the right. And I think you mentioned in this piece too, that's what they understood right from the get-go, right? They had lost the culture war so that they were going to have to go and dig in long-term.
Yeah, absolutely. One of Leo's lead guys said that directly. And Federalist Society, as you said, I mean, it hosts sort of recruitment events and has chapters in almost every major university in the country. They lure them with their, free food and get
cocktail
all these
parties.
Law students. Yeah, exactly. And so then, they play a large role in promoting this idea that I talked about earlier of originalism, which is like this right-wing idea that the founding fathers, the people who wrote the Constitution and amended the Constitution, landed white elite men should be able to like interpret what those men intended somehow, even though like our society has changed lots in over 200 years.
Like women can vote now and things like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Like those small little details. Yeah.
Just,
They, like I mentioned in the last episode I came on, they this idea even was based in racially segregated schools, like protecting racially segregated schools. So in itself, it's like a very harmful ideology. So this is the Federal Society's main goal, is to promote judges into important positions and put justices in power who adhere to this fake ideology that they created.
Right. And then they have this whole network that supports that ideology that they created, right? So you've got Leonard Leo, you've got the Federal Society, and now under the Federal Society, or under the Judicial Crisis Network, you have a range of other funds, basically, or organizations that are primarily funded by Leonard Leo, which then goes on to fund these other organizations to push legislation and stuff. Am I getting that kind of right?
So Leonard Leo isn't he's the
The
fundraiser. He's the
fundraiser.
man, the sort of puppet master, but he's not the person that, as far as we know, that's doing the funding. He gets lots of money to puppeteer, but he doesn't fund this himself. That's part of what's most disturbing about this is we are unsure. It's at most several people funding this operation, but more than likely one single person who is funding this entire operation. And that's terrifying, because that has implications for, it makes it so that the ultra wealthy have disproportionate say in how our society and how our democracy or lack thereof runs. And people don't want their elected and unelected officials to be doing the bidding of corporate and billionaire interests. Actually, a majority of Americans, regardless of political affiliation, polls show want strong public disclosure laws so they can see who's pulling the strings behind this. But without public disclosure, we have no idea who is funding, or we have a very little idea of who is funding this massive network.
So Leonard Leo is just basically going around raising a bunch of money for these kind of organizations. And you say, okay, you said RAGA, right? And then with the Republican State Legislative Committee, is that the other one, right?
Yep.
These are two of the main funders that are working at the state level now.
Yeah, these are two of the major organizations that are sort of the architecture for pushing right-wing agendas at the state level. Yeah.
So if I'm just a person who is in a state, like I'm in Pennsylvania, and I want to kind of find out kind of like what these people are funding, can I even get to that information or find out like where that money's coming from or what their agendas are? Or is it just kind of showing up in people's pockets and then going from there?
That's complicated, and I wish
know,
Evan, my colleague, was here to help me because he's actually more of the expert in this type of thing. But I believe these are 527 organizations. So I think the donors are publicly reported, but because of weak disclosure laws, they are reported, I believe, not as badly as 501c3 and 4 organizations, which are 2 years behind, but I think they're still slightly delayed, so you can't figure it out immediately. They also have this, their MO is sort of to fund things at the last minute. So for state courts, for example, usually they wait until the week before a state election.
I found that was crazy.
Yeah. And then they funnel millions of dollars in, or at least, over $1 million in, which in terms of state elections is, a bomb.
Yeah, and I mean, just what you just said there. So people kind of really get this. Is they actually wait from what you were saying in the article. Basically the day after there's the kind of the financial disclosure deadline hits. So all the financial disclosures go out, right? The reports go in, and it's like the next day you got these folks showing up with tons of cash, usually very close to the election, and dumping a ton of money, like millions and millions of dollars, into promoting their candidates or kind of running this kind of kind of negative campaigning kind of up to the election, right? And so there's no time to respond to something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's terrifying because there's so many levels that they're doing this at. Even if you just look at state Supreme Courts, like every process is different, at the state level. So but there's various ways that they're attacking the state courts, and they do that through trying to make elections for the Supreme Court's partisan, for example. So in deep red states, they will there are some states where you don't have to write Republican or Democrat next to the name of a judge, which kind of makes sense given that courts are supposed to be nonpartisan anyway, so who cares supposedly about their affiliation? But then they advocate super heavily for there to be that name next, the Republican or Democrat next to it, because they know that people will tend to vote along party lines in the deep red state rather than vote for like a fair arbiter of the law, which they had been doing actually. And state courts are remarkably like nonpartisan actually in states where there's not that designation. And even better than that is there's a thing called a merit selection process where a supposedly nonpartisan panel will select judges, and it's not actually an election, but they're trying to kind of rig it so that these judges are elected and elected with the R next to their name. So there's like many ways that they're going about kind of trying to dominate these state courts.
Right. So the one we saw, that's been here, it's been with us for kind of like a decade or so, was when we started finding out they're funding through organizations like ALEC, for example. They were funding model legislation that was going to state legislators, and then state legislators were introducing it. That was kind of like almost like there's the traditional model, right? Going after legislation in the states. And you talk about in here too as well about how, right back in 2009, you had the kind of, the redistricting project by the Republicans who said, okay, we need to get control of the kind of gerrymandering process, the redistricting process, so that we can set us up for that next go round. And that's already done. That's like old school at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that started in 2010. I don't know if it's a coincidence that that's the same year Citizens United got passed, but
I don't think anything is a coincidence ever again anymore. So.
Yeah, exactly. So and since the redistricting project, they've helped to flip 1,000 legislative seats to the right in state legislatures. So this is going on at the same time, if we want to talk about this in terms of abortion, at the same time as these think tanks in quotes, and sort of advocacy action arms in quotes are creating model bills, like you mentioned. So ALEC does model bills, and actually there's an ALEC meeting coming up, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and what is surprised, they're going to talk about abortion there. So there's a possibility there of maybe creating some model bills, or at least talking to legislators there about that. But what we do know, there are 3 organizations that are really pushing the abortion restrictions and abortion bans at the state level. And that's Students for Life that you mentioned, where Leo sat on their board, SBA, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life, which used to be Susan B. Anthony List, and that has received, tons of money. I'm not sure exactly how much, but tons of money from the Judicial Crisis Network, Leo's Judicial Crisis Network / Concord Fund, and the 85 Fund, which is also in the Leo Network. Alliance Defending Freedom is a really interesting one because there's no obvious Leo connections, but Alliance Defending Freedom is the group that sort of underwrote the bill in Mississippi that eventually reached the Supreme Court and Dobbs v. Jackson and overturned Roe. And their fellow is Erin Hawley, who is Josh Hawley's wife.
This blew my mind.
Yeah, Josh Hawley's wife, but also she's a fellow at the quote unquote Independent Women's Law Center, which is the legal center of Independent Women's Forum that has gotten $6+ million from the Leonard Leo, I believe that number is right, since 2014. And Erin Hawley has gotten $617,000, I believe, has gotten paid that much money from them. At the same time as they say they don't take a stance on abortion, but like that is a dubious claim, and we've shown that pretty heavily.
So that was one of these things I had to read that a couple times. Wait a minute. Erin Hawley is Senator Josh Hawley's wife, the dude with the fist in the air to the insurrectionist, and then the kind of run like a scared little bunny through the hallways afterwards as the mob's coming to get you. Yes, a runaway Hawley, as Emily just said. Exactly. But to see the depth in which that these folks are connected, right? And that Erin Hawley has been, she's been a senior appellate counsel, right? And basically one who's been pushing hard for the kind of like the criminalization of abortion. I get that right?
I don't know about criminalization of abortion, but definitely for she's written heavily against state constitutions that have abortion protections. She's written about the overturn of Roe. We actually are going to publish tomorrow a literal play-by-play of Aaron Hawley's thing and how Samuel Alito just basically like or let's just say there's overlap of all the arguments in the Alito decision to overturn Roe with Aaron Hawley's rhetoric that she's been spewing for a year and a half at least.
So this is like Alyssa being the managing editor and being careful about what claims we can make here. But I will say, come on, of course, right? If they were in direct kind of like sitting down together working out the language, I mean, these people, that's crazy. Anyways.
And also like, Josh Hawley just introduced a bill that would funnel federal money to these outrageous pregnancy crisis centers, the right-wing like Christian right centers that scare women into people into not getting abortions, and she goes on like CBN, I think, is like this right-wing Christian
Broadcasting Network,
and is promoting this bill too. It's just really gross.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Well, I'll be looking for that tomorrow. I'll be refresh all day long. So let me ask you this then. So you've got these organizations that are in place. So it's one of the things that, like Rebecca Traister, for example, just sticks out in my mind, is she's been someone who's been consistently saying, look, they're coming for Roe v. Wade. They've got everything in place to come after kind of abortion, and not just abortion, but they're going to come after contraception. They're going to come after all sorts of reproductive health. They're going to come after, kind of equal rights, a right to, same-sex partnerships, same-sex marriage, all this kind of stuff. And Rebecca Traister, I remember saying, like, look, for all this time, you all said that we were kind of going too far, that we were kind of being too extreme, that we were over, blowing this out of proportion, we're being hyperbolic. Now here we go. This is what we've been saying for years. And right now, I don't think we just saw in Pennsylvania, for example, they passed literally like the last order of business, and kind of under the cover of night, they began the process of introducing the constitutional amendment to make abortion illegal in Pennsylvania. That's got to go through kind of, a couple sessions before it can actually be introduced. But we should not be surprised, right, that we're going to see pushes at the legislative level to criminalize abortion or to make it illegal. We're going to see attempts, strong pushes, from what I got in your articles, to push for Supreme Court justices, right, that are going to support the overturning of abortion rights. And then finally, that we'll also see this push into attorneys generals to make sure those people who are going to be enforcing, right, the law are going to be anti-abortion too as well. So what are some of those pushes, or are there particular, say, legislation or particular patterns that people should be watching out for or expecting come into the lead up to the midterms and beyond? I don't know if I'm saying that exactly very well.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's no holds bar at this point. They got their Roe, but it really is just the beginning. I feel like I keep saying that, but a lot of people think that this was their ultimate goal, and I think it was just it was sort of a test run to see what they could do, and they've done that, and now they're, there's 32 or 33 states holding state Supreme Court elections this year. That's 86 out of 344 total seats. It's terrifying. There's elections happening that are, like I said, I think the state courts are the last sort of protection of democracy, and there are many 4-3 Democratic state courts that are up for election in 2022, like Illinois, for example, and Kansas. And in Kansas is particularly creepy, I think, because they have this sort of the best case scenario for a Supreme Court, which is the merit selection process. And they have this group called Value Them Both, which is a right-wing Christian coalition that raised $4.6 million. It's led by Kansas Family Voice. It's got other members like Focus on the Family, which is a right-wing hate group. And Students for Life is canvassing for them. Like it's just sort of and they've themselves, I can't remember which group, maybe it was, I think it was Value Them Both itself that said that this is like the first test of this effort to kind of take over the state courts, and so to like fix it for abortion.
That's heavy. I mean, that's I mean, especially if you're saying like that's what's been the last bulwark. I mean, like, again, I say, like, here in Pennsylvania, we've had a Democratic governor who has vetoed bill after bill, anti-abortion legislation, bill after bill after bill, and that's been it, right? That's when held it out, and we've got a Supreme Court that has been relatively good, right? Especially since the last kind of elections when you have a Democratic, quote unquote, leading majority on the Supreme Court. But to know that, that's going to become, unless this is pushed back, unless these efforts are pushed back kind of on the ground in the states, then we could see the majority of states actually kind of fall to this, anti-abortion future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're focused on abortion, but it has huge implications, obviously, for even our 2024 elections. And, because, for example, Pennsylvania was a holdout, the election results were challenged there, and the state Supreme Court was great and didn't allow that to happen. But we don't know what'll happen if, because Pennsylvania has, I was looking at this before I was on, has an election in fall of 2023 for the state Supreme Court.
Yep.
There's one Republican, one Democrat up for retention, meaning you can either vote yes or no, and you have to get, I think, 60% yes or something like that. And last fall was sort of a test run for Republican State Leadership Committee, RSLC, and they spent $1.6 million to get a right-wing candidate elected. And so, and I'm sure we'll see this again, their sort of MO of spending really last minute to get their right-wing candidate elected and possibly oppose the Democratic candidate. So I guess you have that to look forward to,
Right.
But you have time to push back.
Right, and I think that again, the fact that it's an off year election, right, where that it's where we're going to see. Turnout is not generally good, which of course is why exactly they're gearing it up for that period of time. So they know, okay, you're not going to get lower voter turnout. So if they start working the phones as it were now, by the time we keep this going, this is one of the things I've said, and I may have even said this last time you were on too, is when I look at what's going on in the school board elections and what's happening in our school boards, we have these kind of really extremist takeovers of these school boards and all this cultural politics up on the school boards. In my mind, is like, yes, of course, it is about those issues that they're coming for, but the money is about keeping those votes activated and ready for the next 2-3 elections kind of coming down the road. It seems to me. I mean, I at one point I would have kind of like stopped myself on those sentences because I would think it was like sound too conspiratorial. But this is what's actually been playing out, right, in state by state. And, you document in these pieces what's happening in North Carolina, what's happening in Montana, in addition to stuff that's happening kind of in Kansas, is following exactly that kind of playbook.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the school board elections and stuff, because that is definitely part of their strategy, is to mobilize people who haven't been mobilized before. And they're, funneling tons of some of the same groups, like Alliance Defending Freedom has gotten money from Betsy DeVos, for example. Betsy DeVos just spoke at Moms for Liberty Summit 2 weekends ago. Probably, I would guess, funds them partially. Their Moms for Liberty PAC in Florida was funded, $50,000 out of the $50,600 was given by the far right Publix heiress who helped fund the January 6th insurrection. So
God,
I mean,
I
all
don't mean
these
to be
things
laughing,
are,
but holy shit, I mean,
yeah, all these things are related, like you said. Like they want people to show up to these small elections because they or mobilize them, like really get them agitated to show up for down bucket or down ballot initiatives, like or small term or smaller like positions like school board or whatever, so that they can get their right wing folks also on the up ballot.
Whew. That is a lot. That is a lot. So I think it's fair to say that anybody who's questioning that, okay, maybe there's going to be a turn of goodwill, should just kind of set those delusions aside, as it were. That we're really going to be in it for. We're going to be in for fights for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we have some fighting to do, I would
Yeah.
say. But I don't think like we ended our TruthOut article in a positive note because I have seen people mobilized who I have never seen mobilized before and really angry and ready to fight back. And I think it's unfortunate that it took this to do it and that we're sort of on a seeming downslide with this, but I do think people are mobilizing, and I just want to really celebrate to your local PAC. I think that's amazing because, as I've told you, I've seen at the local level like some of these right-wing initiatives and right-wing PACs designed to kind of create a coup on school boards, and there's no centralized effort. Like, we don't have a Leonard Leo.
Right.
As much as the right wing tries to project and say that there's left wing dark money, whatever, like that it's just not in the same playing field, and it's really up to local people to do their part to oppose this.
Well, one of the things I think is also critical, and I've seen the organizing that's happening, kind of around me, but also kind of state by state, is that I as much as what happened in the school boards has mobilized the right wing, I also think it's kind of been a wake up call for people who may not just spend a whole lot of time thinking about politics, right? Or even people who are, they do their duty, they vote, they kind of get involved, but not to understand how the extremists are here in our backyard, right? And they're willing to kind of sacrifice our kids' education, right? And for their own kind of ideological agenda, and that's brought a lot of people out to do things that they haven't done before. Like, they may have voted before, but they weren't out knocking doors. And like, I probably 6 messages just today, probably in the last 3 hours before we came on tonight, about people who are going out and canvassing for candidates tonight, and I think it's critical. And then on the other side is also saying, like, because we don't have that centralized arm, like you have the Leonard Leo coming out, that it's, at least one of the hopes of a lot of us are to say, okay, we need to actually show the Democrats, right, that organizing pays off, that the model of flying in consultants at the last minute, kind of from out of state, from out of county, for all this stuff to try to give their messaging war, that's just not where it's at. And so we've got to be able to convince them that they need to shift the resources to organizing on the ground. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So
can I ask you just one quick thing? And I know kind of we're going long here, but let me just ask you this. So one of the things that surprised me about that first piece you had out was stuff about the attorneys general, right? The attorneys general was something that's not exactly necessarily on a lot of people's radar in some ways, right? But can you just talk about that just briefly, about where the attorneys general and why that is important to that right-wing agenda when it comes to abortion?
Yeah. So we focused a little less on that, but attorneys general are the highest law enforcement officers at the state level. So they'd have a lot of latitude in figuring out how state abortion bills are interpreted and whether or not they're enforced. So they get to decide if, let's think of an example, if the state abortion bills, for example, apply to someone who goes out of state or something like that's just an example. And so it's really important actually in terms of like how the bans, even if they are successful, are implemented. And so yeah, there are some attorney general races that seem pretty important. Like I mentioned, we mentioned Wisconsin in our article because there's a Democratic attorney general there who has refused to enforce the very archaic bill. I think it was in the 1850s that it was passed, and has gotten a lot of flack for it. And like there's been right-wing attacks and like already funds coming in to try to install a right-wing alternative. So yeah, that's the attorney's general story.
Yeah, no, good. Because I just think at every single level to be paying attention. Now, before we go, obviously this is, we talked a little about this before the show, but Anna just kind of got in on chat, basically asked the question, right? Where do we go from here, right? Is that big question? It's like, if you're thinking about people moving forward, how would you begin to answer that? Where do we go from here? And I know that's the $1 million question, and it's not just there's no unicorn, right? There's no person riding in on a white horse, right? But how do you look at that question?
Yeah, it's a hard question, but I think we talked a little bit about it, like organizing in your own community, knocking doors, but even and there's room for people doing this on social media too. I don't think it has to be physical at this point. But I also think doing your own digging, like I do this for a living and I love that I get paid for it, but also I've had your amazing listeners too, like write to me and be like, follow this thread or whatever. And that's super useful. Like you can do your own digging. You can email me and tell me what you found if it's something important. I would say also we talked about how important it is to just be knowledgeable about what's going on and following some of the investigative outlets that are doing the work to uncover the money behind all of this is important. So you follow us at True North
100%.
Research. It's you can follow us on Twitter, our website, our Substack. You can follow me on Twitter. There's also Judd Legum has Popular Info Substack that's amazing and mostly free. You can subscribe to it if you want to. Documented is an amazing investigative outlet that does similar work and a lot on the environment as well. And then Center for Media Democracy is also really great. So I think all those are really excellent resources for people to just like get informed. Also pushing for public disclosure laws, stronger public disclosure laws. I mentioned there's a bill by Senator Whitehouse that's coming out called the Disclosure Act. So that could go a long way, a step at least in the right direction. And then I think if you have the capacity to start your own PAC, I'm really like so impressed by you. And because you're the only PAC that I've seen like countering the right-wing alternatives, and they have such deep pockets. It's such a hard effort, but I think that you're doing the hard work, and everyone should try to do that too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's like it's whatever that punk rock ethos of okay, you're just going to DIY it and kind of see what happens. I mean, we don't have like you said before, our communities, folks that are kind of wanting to kind of defend kind of abortion rights, want to make sure that same-sex marriage stays in place, want to kind of not criminalize kind of like biracial couples, right? As crazy as that sounds, we've already seen this, right? There was I forget where it was, but somebody started talking about wanting to introduce a bill. I mean, this is incredible. But to actually say, okay, we can do what we can, and hopefully that we're going to have a little bit of a disproportionate impact on the local level. So we'll do what we can for sure. All those organizations that Alyssa just mentioned, I will be sure to put those in the show notes. That make sure to follow them. Definitely, check her out on Twitter. I don't have your Twitter. What was your Twitter handle right off the bat? I'm sorry, I don't have it right up.
Alyssa Bowen.
There you go. Anybody who saw like the stuff on Twitter is we kind of tagged her like 1,000 times over because you should definitely be following her. Definitely check out True North Research. You can follow True North. Of course, I messed it all up here. Go to truenorthresearch.org. That's where you're going to find that. I'm going to have links to all their kind of social media and their accounts there. Really fantastic. Definitely check out our articles on TruthOut. Everything that we talked about here, you're going to get much more in depth by going over and kind of checking out those articles and sharing those articles. And keep up the absolutely fantastic work that everybody is doing on the ground. I'm just like Alyssa said, it's the organizing, and I really think that, minds are in the right direction. Well, Alyssa, I treasure your work, and I treasure the work that you're doing at True North Research and the stuff that you're putting out at TruthOut. Thank you so much for kind of coming back on the show and kind of reintroducing all this stuff back to our community, especially in the wake of the Roe v. Wade decision. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be on.
Oh God, well, I'll be bugging you again. You can be sure, and you're probably getting messages from me too, like, "Oh, did you see this? Did you check this out?" Just like last time. So here we go.
I love it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being Benny. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, everybody else who tuned in tonight. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We will continue this conversation throughout the week on Discord. We will also kind of make sure that all those links will be in tonight's show notes. Thank you, Alyssa, for coming on here. And have a great week and keep up the fight. All right. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to remind you, we'll be back here Wednesday with Cyril Michalakos for the Wednesday show, and Friday back with Amy Connect for the Friday Politics Roundup. Take it easy, everybody. See ya!